Joe, it feels like we've tapped into some quality nostalgia so far this season.
It's something that we've done very well throughout the 3 seasons or 104 episodes that we've covered so far. Nostalgia seems to be our thing, and one that did particularly well last season was MythBusters, which makes it pretty. It's the best opening segue I could ask for, because this episode is about more like Discovery reality TV that was also very big at the same time, but
Yeah.
for, I guess, worse reasons. In that, like,
Filthier
there's no
reasons.
scandal. There's no scandal in it. There's no, like, the host was fantastic. It's just we saw him go through some shit every week.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Oh,
literal amounts of shit.
That is one big pile of shit.
yeah. Yes. And I think for a lot of us back in the early 2000s, we were either watching MythBusters or on the other side of the same programming block, we were catching Dirty Jobs, which is, of course, our topic for this week. And I got to put it this way. When we were playing Grand Theft Auto 3 back in the day, we were still playing it pretty consistently, even in 2003.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember when I was taking breaks, Dirty Jobs was like a big part of that break time. And coming back from school or work or whatever, I wasn't watching ESPN, wasn't really watching cartoons or anything, mid-teens, but I was consistently putting on the Discovery Channel.
Oh, yeah. It was just like, it kind of, I mean, it does what all reality TV does. It just kind of aspires to, not aspires, but it draws on some things that are just in some point in times like the best and worst parts of our humanity. So like most reality TV looks into like how too many of us just seem to really enjoy drama and poor relationship choices. This instead, Discovery Channel shifted into, what just keeps us watching TV and how sensational can we make it without it being like not good for families to watch? And they nailed that with this programming block.
And you're right. I mean, this wasn't just a fun time to be sitting down and watching, like edutainment, if you will. Like, this was a time where the Discovery Channel was actually at its own crossroads, and we were getting things like you mentioned. We were getting the boys over here at Orange County Choppers, at American Chopper, screaming at each other, throwing chairs, making memes. I believe there was Monster Garage too at that same point in time.
Monster Garage was there.
But this was different. This spot that MythBusters and Dirty Jobs kind of fell into, very less drama typically, and more of a focus on, hey, you're going to learn some things, but you're going to have fun while you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And without the whole your teacher wheeling out the TV on a cart on a Monday morning.
The same visual I was going to go with was like it was like having that cart rolled out in your living room, for the same experience. Which I got to say, back then I think everybody had an entertainment center with a sarcastically sized television within it that either didn't fit or was way too small because you committed to one or the other before you purchased things.
Yeah, and this is pre LCD plasma TVs.
Oh.
This is definitely like you got a massive tube TV, which meant it was like, a good like 40 inches like normal, but then like behind it was another like 70 inches of business.
Yes. Yeah, like when that TV walked by, you were like, damn.
Didn't
Man,
realize
look at
that
back.
Samsung was dragging that wagon, right?
I was going to say, you can see her back from the front. Man. However, looking at Dirty Jobs as a topic, I was actually really excited to do this because for me, I actually think Dirty Jobs could be one of my favorite shows from this era of television. And we'll obviously get into some of the reasons why. But one of the things about it that some people may have lost track of, is how long it's actually been here, because
Yeah.
the original run for this was pretty successful. I mean, it went up until about 2012, and the original run was from like '03 to 2012, the end of the world, right? When
Yes, the Mayan
yeah.
calendar came to an end, which meant the world came to an end.
and Mike Rowe was thinking the same thing. He's like, you know what? I think we're gonna call this the end of the show too. It just
We're
makes
gonna
sense.
cash it right here.
Well, and that's what ended up happening. I mean, he did this like little Australian adventure for like the last season of the show, and then Dirty Jobs just kind of went away for a little bit, and in the way that we know, at least.
Yeah.
But it would actually come back. They would pump life back into it. It would end up becoming Dirty Jobs: The Road Trip in 2020, a play on Mike Rowe's last name.
Very nice.
Yeah, but then, kind of like, you know, P. Diddy and like Prince, over time, it's like, you know what, let's take some words off the end of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, by last year, it just went by Dirty Jobs
Which
again.
is back. Yeah, and I found that just fascinating too. The fact that this show pretty much went pretty strong for a good 9 years there, and then granted that ninth year in Australia was like 4 or 5 episodes of Mike Rowe doing things, and he quietly rode off into the sunset on us. And then, you know, pandemic time hits, and you know what? Let's see some essential dirty shit again, because it came back at the right time, and because like I've seen some of the newer stuff, and it hasn't changed, and I feel like it never had to. Like I watching like new episodes. Hell, they even still in the intro, they still have like Mike Rowe carrying the pig from season 1 in the pig farming episode. He still does that before they finally cut to the episode that's going on. And the fact that you know that it has like a longer, like not a terribly long intro, but an intro is a callback to an older time.
A simpler time, Joe.
Yes.
When you and I were wearing socks that went up to our kneecaps.
Yep. I say we
shorts.
ditched the baggy pants, I think, by this time. So
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure ankle socks were like the big thing back in like '03. And people were actually rolling their socks down past the ankle line and like tucking it in their shoes if they couldn't afford, which, you know,
actual ankle
whatever.
socks. Yeah.
I mean, they were expensive at one point in time, believe it
They
or not.
were. Now they're commonplace.
Yeah.
But hey, what wasn't commonplace was the outstanding nature of the show, because I think it was nominated for like an Emmy like 5 times with cinematography and like outstanding program. So over its 179 episode run, they really did something great there.
I was going to say, I would not be ashamed of that kind of performance. You know, like when we'll get into some of the reasons for why this show even was a thing, you have to kind of smile that someone else recognized it the same way that we all kind of were. I mean, it's like when you bring up a TV show, and it doesn't matter what kind, right? Like you bring up The Walking Dead with somebody, you could talk about like Mythbusters, like we talked about before. I mean, a lot of times when you bring up TV shows, people are like, oh, yeah. It's like, I kind of like that one. I'm not a big fan. Most people I was around with this show, there was usually never any questioning if this was a decent program. It was like whether or not you could handle the subject matter of that week and what his job was comprised of. And so this is one of those rare times when I think you're going to have that critic and fan consensus coming together. And I always enjoyed it. I was always in a good mood watching this show.
I think it's because it helps you gain like a greater appreciation for the life that we have, and not in like a guilt-seeking way, like, oh, you better be thankful that your life is easy, because when I was your age, I had to walk uphill both ways to go to school with a hot potato to keep me warm. But more like, hey, have you ever actually been in the sewer system that was like hand-built, but it's still brick and mortar? And like it's literally raining cockroaches, and this is all so you can flush a toilet. Like it's that sort of thing. It just kind of, you gain an appreciation and an understanding for our own lives that you didn't know. It's like kind of that whole thing, like, hey, you know, if society fell today and you needed to survive for food, what would you do? Like, well, I'd just go to the store and buy milk, man. Well, no, it's like, oh, hey, did you figure out how that milk actually gets there? Like
Yeah.
this is the thing that showed. And you also, I guess as like a Dairy State resident, like the amount of cow-based episodes on the show, again, really drives home how much like we take for granted. So much just like the shit work that people have to do so we get our milk and our cheese.
I mean, yeah, like you said, we kind of, you drive between towns and you're going to see a cow farm here in Wisconsin, but yeah, for the rest of the country, there is a very high likelihood that maybe you don't. And so there's a combination of things kind of going on here. You have someone like Mike Rowe that's just got that charisma. He's the guy that you trust the voice of because it just sounds good.
Yeah.
Non-threatening, of course,
No.
as well. And then you slap on that like how it's made type of label, right? Like the almost like the manufacturing series. And that's just a human interest piece. You know, I think a lot of us never think about it. Like how does that get from a raw material to packaged in my store? And so, and to be honest with you, Joe, even some of the stuff that we've created, because we do make the shorts, folks, we make these little, 1 minute entertainment things to look at. When we get into the how it's made kind of stuff, people to this day, like whenever we make, I just did one on Peeps a couple weeks ago, and suddenly people are like, holy shit, Peeps. So
it's the same
this
with
kind of
Spam.
stuff. Yeah.
Which was like a year ago now. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that stuff sells, and it's been selling for a very long time. So like, there's no shock factor there for me, but what I wanted to start with, now that we're into the meat,
Yes.
who is Mike Rowe, the host of this show, who oddly sounds similar to my voice depending on inflection? Yeah.
Which is a good question, because if you've watched the show and you haven't tried figuring out more about Mike Rowe, one of the things that you would just kind of assume is that he worked some sort of laborious, dirty job at some point in time himself, because, I don't know, he kind of gives off that blue collar, like, I work, at what should be a 9 to 5, but really I'm there at like 5 and I go home at like 6, kind of vibe. He seems like this is the guy who, I mean, in a term that comes up a few times in the show, like, embraces the suck because he actually enjoys it, sort of thing. Like, I don't want to say not like a salt of the earth guy, but like, jack of all trades. Like, he's going to work anything and everything because that's how he grew up and that's just who he is.
Which, when you start to look into his background, you start to go, I'm not quite sure if I follow this. because his grandfather and his father, blue collar guys, they their nails are dirty every day, and he talks about this in the beginning of the show and how he built the idea and all that. But Mike Rowe was actually really gifted in theater and singing, and so he was a very big performing arts kind of guy, and so he was actually an opera singer at one point in time before all this stuff started. Yeah. And so you kind of see these breadcrumbs of him. Like he does occasionally sing on the show, and you're like, oh man, this guy sounds like he's actually got some experience, and that's because he does. It's really, really kind of cool. So yeah, now some quick hits for folks. If you still don't know who Mike Rowe is, obviously he's the host of Dirty Jobs. Yep. You might have heard of his side project called Somebody's Gotta Do It, which was a CNN program that took place in between the hiatus of Dirty Jobs. So always kind of in this. But he's also the narrator of Deadliest Catch, How the Universe Works, and of course, Joe, Shark Week.
Shark Week. Yes. He's been at Shark Week ever since, I think. Did that start when he actually had a few specials, or was he Shark Week host before that?
No, I think he was ground floor of Shark Week back in like the mid 2000s when that stuff really started ramping up.
Yeah, when Shark Week got like, because I mean, I remember Shark Week pre 2000s when it was like, it was literally like 6 a.m. to midnight sharks, and it was just pure educational programming. Like the entertainment piece that's a part of Shark Week now wasn't there before. But I digress. Back to Mike Rowe, because if you don't remember him from those things or Dirty Jobs, you may have seen him on a commercial for the Ford F-Series, because he did become the spokesman for Ford Motor Company for quite a while.
Yeah, which to this day, there's only a few voices I recognize in like automotive advertising. I immediately align Mike Rowe with Ford. It's just it's synonymous for me. And once again, I feel safe, Joe. He makes me feel safe, this guy.
He does. It's again, he's got one of those buttery voices. Like he just it's got like the right amount of smooth and gravel, just like pitched right in there.
Yeah. Yeah. See, like that's the thing. I got to figure this out, because people say, man, you got a really good voice for podcasting, but not good enough that I feel like being around you. And I'm like, that's fair.
Oh, that's fair. That's okay.
Yeah, that's really fair. But
that's all right.
But speaking of being close quarters with someone, before Dirty Jobs was ever a thing, Mike Rowe actually used to be the on-air TV host for America Airlines programming. So when you're on a plane and you have your little interactive screen in front of you, this dude was the guy on like this like news or like, you know, entertainment program while you wait kind of thing. And it's crazy to think that somebody had to advertise CD-ROMs at one point in time. But he was also he was a show host for a CD-ROM based music trivia program called Radioactive. Which clearly he has the voice.
He does.
It just worked for him. But one of the things that he actually references on the TV show is that he actually worked for QVC in the early 90s. Yes, QVC has been around that long.
Yes.
And he commented on how he was fired by QVC 3 separate times, which he doesn't disclose as to why.
Huh.
but he was fired 3 separate times before he decided to quit himself in 1993. So, Joe, he's never disclosed why he was fired 3 times by QVC, but clearly this guy must be some kind of like free spirit. You know, he's very sarcastic, which I think may lead to unfortunate situations in the corporate world.
Yeah. And given what QVC sells, I would not be surprised if he was like, you know what? This probably isn't worth the $89.99 we're charging you for, but it looks good, so give it a try anyway. Damn it, Mike, you can't say that.
Which to that point, man, there is an episode of the show where he actually does make like a QVC style joke when he's trying to sell something in that same type of style. I think that has to be it. That has to be it. He's so sarcastic. You know, he doesn't take himself seriously, and when you make him say stupid things like that, I could see him totally just like waving it off, like no.
Absolutely. I mean, hell, there's one episode I think where he makes a comment on he could have been a game show host, but he was here doing this, which made me think like could he have had Cash Cab? Could that have been Mike Rowe instead of Benjamin Bailey? Which
Benjamin
I mean, don't get
Bailey.
me wrong, Benjamin Bailey, like. Dude, no side against you, man. Like, love that show. Still do. Like, I go home, and now the Game Show Network just plays it for 2 hours straight. Watch it for 2 hours every time. Watching it was brand new. My roommates and I looked forward to it. Watching Cash Cab, which maybe that could be an episode someday we talk about Cash Cab. But anyway, maybe did Mike Rowe have a shot at that before he got Dirty Jobs?
So here's the funny thing you mentioned. I'm really happy you brought up Benjamin Bailey, because I feel like between Benjamin Bailey and Mike Rowe, like if you were there and somebody just got hit by a car in front of you, I feel like Mike Rowe would actually be shocked and just be like, "Oh my God, is he okay? Are you all right?" While Benjamin Bailey would be like, "That's pretty crazy, isn't it?" Yeah. I'll bet he checked his shoelaces before he got hit. No? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, but that's the kind of styles we've got here. But then if you actually watched Mike Rowe on this show, he does have that Benjamin Bailey vibe to him.
Yeah.
Much more. He's he's flirting with people almost, right? Like so you can tell if you've watched those shows how different these people are. But Joe, believe it or not, there was a time before the dirty.
Ooh, is that so?
Yes, sir. Now, are you familiar with any of the work that Mike Rowe did like pre-discovery, like, you know, any of his news work have you seen before?
Say, aside from the accolades that we just listed, I am not.
That's okay. He used to work for a show called Evening Magazine that he has referenced on the show too. Like, it's funny. He doesn't hide from any of this stuff. And what's interesting about it is that he did work for, like, technically like a news program, okay? And what Evening Magazine had Mike Rowe doing was a segment called Somebody's Got to Do It, which we've already mentioned was his CNN spinoff in between seasons.
Yeah.
And now it's literally the name of what he was doing way back when he worked in San Francisco for a news station.
Ooh.
But he was doing the same kind of stuff, just for them.
For less money. Presumably.
I'm assuming for far less money. Absolutely. Yeah. But things went well with this segment, okay? Now, when it didn't, or I should say when people started asking questions, was when he artificially inseminated a cow, and that's when the fan mail and the inquiries began piling in.
Is that actually how it's done? Do you have to put your hand in the rectum? Because that doesn't that seems like a one-way street for a cow. Like, is that how it's done? Yes, that's how it's done. You start there.
Does he have to smile the whole time? You know, does he have to play Lionel Richie while it's going on? You know.
Man.
But it's funny though. Like we just talked about how his family comes from blue collar. They're used to doing this kind of work, probably holding a monkey wrench or something, right? And now you have Mike Rowe like literally doing every possible thing to lead in to what eventually becomes Dirty Jobs, right? And that's exactly what this idea became. It was such a popular segment, and it became so popular that he was like, you know what? I'm going to shop this idea around.
Yeah.
I've already done all this work. Why not?
Right? Might as well.
Yes, sir. So that's how we got it. That's what kicked this whole thing off, was literally a news segment where a dude puts on a big old glove and starts feeling around a cow.
Which is basically kind of, I would say, like the theme of the show, but when you start looking into what is Dirty Jobs, poop. There is a lot of poop in Dirty Jobs.
That is one big pile of shit.
It's not the only thing. It's not just how is Mike Rowe involved with feces this week. But like you've got like there's like we talked about.
I'd watch that.
I mean, I would. Like I would just see Mike Rowe interact with more poop, which I am sure. Now that he's got to be in like what, his late 50s, like early 60s, like doing this job is probably the last thing he wants to hear. Yes, the people want more poop. But yeah, like you've got lots of animal like poop. Obviously we talked about like looking at like the sewers, specifically I think it was San Francisco, from that episode. So that's human poop. There is a episode which probably was like, if there's any episode that probably would have made me quit, it may have. I mean, the sewer episode was there, but like the poo pot episode, where like it's basically like 100% natural, biodegradable, organic pots that are made from cow poop. And by the time you get them, they're thoroughly reprocessed, and they don't smell. They don't. I mean, you could eat it and it wouldn't be like bad anymore, which Mike didn't, and I wouldn't, because purely out of principle. But yeah, it was making these pots, and Mike was involved in every single step. But not always poop, because one thing that happened in season 1 that came back up during season 2 was the fact that he did, I think it was like a snake wrangler job that he had done.
Yeah.
And he worked out, they looked at like how much they actually made in a year, which back then I think it equated to being around like $30,000. And they looked at, like, they broke it down to hourly. It ends up being like $14 an hour, which, could you imagine, like in this day and age, like $14 an hour being a snake wrangler? Absolutely not. But one thing that he went further to calculate in this, because one thing that happened very thoroughly, or very often as a snake wrangler, was how often he was bit trying to wrangle said snakes. Because if you think of like, oh, snake wrangling, this is probably like, I know from earlier Discovery Channel and Animal Planet days, this is probably Steve Irwin, where you get a stick in one hand, you grab the tail, you use a stick. There's no time for that as a snake wrangler. You have to pounce on the snake and grab it right away, which leads to bites. So Mike had worked out just how much, given how many times he was bit, as well as the actual snake wranglers were bit, he'd figured out how much they were paid per bite through that. In which case, it was, I believe it was $3.74. And Mark, because we haven't done it in a while, adjusting for inflation, how much do you think a snake wrangler gets paid per bite these days?
Per bite. So just adjusting for $3-ish cents in $2003 versus 2023.
That is there 20 years later. How much do you get paid per snake bite as a snake wrangler?
I would think it's got to be like $5.85, close to $6 in that range. Is that fair?
You're right there. $6.26 a bite, sir. In which case, still not worth it.
Not worth it.
Not worth it. If you again, this is season 1. Go back and watch how many times he gets bit. Not worth it. Again, these also, they're not venomous snakes that they're wrangling, but still, it's a snake bite. Not going to feel good. Venom or no venom, I'm out.
Are they angry sea bass? Well, they're very ill-tempered.
Ill-tempered. Ooh, that's a start.
Ooh. Okay, so what I love about Dirty Jobs is that it does still encapsulate what we talked about with this news segment. Okay, Mike Rowe will go out to this location where, assumably, there is a. Did I just say assumably? Is that even a word?
I mean, it should be if it's not.
All right,
you delivered it with enough confidence where I believe it.
Yeah, I was like, this sounds good. Let's keep going with this.
Presumably, but assumably works.
There we go. Presumably, yeah. See, now this is exactly.
See, this is why we have co-hosts. We help each other with vocabulary.
This is how I imagine Jeff Goldblum does things. He just starts talking, and then a word comes up. I like that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, that's not a word.
Yeah. Yeah. Can it be? I think it can. But okay, so we have this news background, okay, like human interest pieces, okay. That's what every single place he goes to visit becomes. Like, yeah, the job is always dirty and filthy, and Mike has to get like knee deep, sometimes up to his neck. But it's a combination of the work being hard and then the people that do the work. And that to me, I think, is where like a lot of the power of this show comes from. It's not just doing something that sucks, but you're working with somebody to share this experience. Yeah. And did it hit that way for you?
It did, and I think what also another way that it just hits is, again, like the people that he is working alongside of who are doing this on a daily basis. And like sometimes, like I think too many Americans, and I think other people may just, again, like look down on people who do these kind of jobs, thinking that like the only reason they must do them is because they have like no skill or education to do anything else. And sometimes it's, I mean, they don't interview, like he doesn't talk to everyone as to how they got into the job, and I'm sure that may be the case with some of these people. But like there is an episode where like this poor woman like comes from vacation and like her house smells like feces, and she goes into her basement to discover that her entire neighborhood septic system has backed up into her basement. And one of the guys who was like at the head of the team that was taking it, the reason why he was doing that was because he had this happen to him, and he remembered the exorbitant price that he had to pay and that other people were charging for this, and he's like, this isn't right. Like, these are people who, due to no fault of their own, are having literally the shittiest day of their life, and they're like getting charged an arm and a leg for it. And that's literally the reason why this guy's doing it. So I think that is another huge part that just really kept me watching and kept other people watching, because it connected us with our fellow Americans doing this work, and for a season, our like Australian friends.
Yeah, right. So that episode is one I immediately thought of myself, because when he was telling that story about just how impacted he was and how he felt all these feelings during that time, I mean, that's one of the shittiest feelings is to come home and find out that like you're literally your home, the thing that you paid for and put a lot of time and effort into, it's got feet of feces sitting in it. And when you watch the team and how they worked, I was just crazy impressed by how much they recognized and how much they understood. And obviously they trained for this job, so don't get me wrong. It's like but like seeing what they did and like pointing it out to Mike and just being like, you can see how it traveled up and all that stuff, and they're pointing all this stuff out. That educational part of it was crazy. You couldn't script that stuff.
No,
that's why, yeah.
Yeah, so you get that in the episodes where like you have guys or women who just actually honestly love the thing that they're doing. There's one episode where he's looking at how it's like basically a corporate deconstruction. So people who are like basically tearing down skyscrapers or business offices, and sometimes I mean one thing that was even cool to learn about there is how like sometimes like they, because of how much they can make basically reselling or repurposing the deconstructed material, they just won't even charge like the people like who they're tearing the building down for, which is also an incredible thing that like a service that they do is like, they could profit off of it and still charge you for like the work, but they don't. But anyway, the the man that Mike spent that episode with, like, just fucking
he's
loved that job. He's a mountain of a man.
He's like 6'5".
And just having the freaking time of his life. And it's like, this is great. This is awesome. Like you cannot watch this and watch him and think like, man, wouldn't you rather like be behind a desk making more money? His honest answer is probably no. Like this is what this guy would like. This is what he wants to do with his life, and it's fantastic.
Dude, you know how many times working in like corporate hell, right, that I've chosen to put my majority of my career into, as I've aged in the various industries I've been a part of, and then communicating with coworkers and going through the same shit every day. One thing that is consistent is that everybody's like, you know what? There are some days where I wish I could just be out in the field mowing grass or something, or chopping wood, or being able to hang my hat on manual labor for a couple days, right? And to see that not have to be the escape for this guy, like he's literally just a really muscly dude with a sledgehammer, and he gets to go to work and do that every day. The perspective is like it's that chef's kiss thing. I'm not going to do the hand gestures. I think people have seen enough of that. But yeah, dude, it was, I don't know, there's some heartwarming shit going on here. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, because when it comes to this show and it being heartwarming, because Mike Rowe, I believe, had a shot at another on-screen host of a show, and it was one or the other. And it was this or Deadliest Catch, which he still kind of, he still worked for. He's still the narration for it. But like, it sounds like he would much rather take doing this job than being on a boat for a very long period of time.
So you're absolutely dead on. There was a conversation had between Mike Rowe and Discovery Channel producers at one point in time, because he had pitched in the idea of not Deadliest Catch, but for Dirty Jobs. Yeah, he's not that good, and he's done so much like voiceover and narration already. He's going to get these shots, and so since he already had the foot in the door, the concept came up. Okay, well, between these two shows, we really only feel like you should have one where you're the presence, and otherwise you're going to burn out trying to do both.
Yeah,
we just don't want you on both. And so there was a point in time where he had actually filmed a bunch of stuff for Deadliest Catch on the boats, meeting the crew, interacting with the equipment and everything, right? Almost like an extended version of Dirty Jobs. And that's when they said, yeah, you got to pick one or the other. You can't do both. And so I think he went with the smart move.
I do too. It's just something where I think having a host for Dirty Jobs almost makes more sense than for Deadliest Catch, because I think the point is like you're there with the crew for Deadliest Catch, you're seeing them do things, and I don't think you really need the connection with the host for that, because you make the connection with the crew that you're with for such a long period of time. Whereas with Dirty Jobs, like you're bouncing between like 2 to 3 jobs an episode. Like you need a host to anchor you through all of that. Otherwise, it becomes, I mean, like, and no detriment to it, it becomes how it's made, but with humans having to talk during it as opposed to a narrator. And I don't
Yeah.
think it would have worked as well with a narrator as opposed to a host.
I think for him, there's natural strengths between his ability to flip the narrator and then the host personas, right? And to your point about Deadliest Catch, yes, I don't think you could have a storyteller do the same thing on that show, because then the way his personality is, that's what kind of sells you on joining him for these dirty jobs, right? His personality wouldn't necessarily sell me on watching Deadliest Catch, because
No.
I'm here to see how many crabs are in that, in that cage.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
not here to
looking
see
for dinner
Mike Rowe.
on that. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
How many crabs
Yeah.
are there that'll soon be on my plate? Because,
Yeah.
crab.
Smart decision, I think. I think in the end, he was exactly where he needed to be. And I think Deadliest Catch is as entertaining as it's going to be with Mike Rowe attached. I really do. So good decision there. Now, one of the best decisions that even Mike Rowe has mentioned, though, is opening up like dirty jobs to the audience, to the fans,
Yes.
to suggest what to do. You remember that? Like every episode, he mentions how, you the fans can decide where I go next, all that good stuff. And Mike Rowe even mentioned in interviews, Joe, that once they did that, he said that he hadn't had an original idea after that point. Like
Didn't
it was
need
just,
Yeah.
the floodgates opened for him. So it's funny to think that he only had 12 actual jobs that he knew they could focus on for the show. And then after that, he was like, I got nothing.
I'm not sure, too. What could be dirtier than these 12 things? Oh, let us tell you, Mike Rowe. There's dirtier out there.
Yes, the sadist fans immediately show up. Yeah. Yeah, which is, to me, I think it was a perfect format. I'm sure he's got to be making some of that up, because there's writers on this show. They're always being creative about stuff. So he's a jokester. I will give him that. But to me, this was like a perfect storm, right? Because we're seeing these jobs that frankly happen every day that we may not know about. We get to meet the people who are actually doing those jobs, and then you have that personal connection to Mike and the fans at the same time. So like it is like a perfect formula for how you can create like a sense of community around a TV show.
Yeah. And granted, it's a perfect formula, but just because the formula works well doesn't mean someone's always going to get the math right, because we did get some episodes that were a little too gross for TV. Now, when we think of like dirty jobs, it's nothing like obviously there are some things that like in like maybe like adult that'd be like too adult. Like obviously like he's not going to like clean up a crime scene, which that would have been really awful to try and pitch as like, yeah, come and do this. No, you can't do that. But
I'm sorry.
however,
that's cracking me up right now.
can you imagine Mike Rowe at a crime scene? Whoa.
Just like, just looking wide-eyed at things. Yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, think of like to try and make it so like it doesn't seem like we're being too morbid. Like if you've ever seen like Leon the Professional, you see the opening hit in the movie when the police carry out like basically the slaughter of Natalie Portman's family. Imagine Mike Rowe like just showing up with the crew after that.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
they must have really made this guy mad. Like,
Yeah.
like, what are you gonna do?
Are the blood splatters always that big? Are they? Is that normal for you to see?
Oh my god!
I don't see him doing that.
He would have just like he probably wouldn't have. I'm sure that's something that he probably would have said no to, but we can see him doing that.
I know. That's the thing. We can see him. How can you tell the bone and the brain matter apart while you're poking through that? Can you let me know?
It's really weird that they always say it's yellow bone marrow, but really I can't tell the difference between this and the red.
Yeah.
I don't-
Which, dude, I'm sorry. That I could totally see him doing that. But yeah, you're absolutely dead on. Some of this stuff just never actually made it to TV because either the network or people watching this were just like, dude, that's too much. You can't put that on there. And one of them was based on this art creator, this artist who made like statues from roadkill. And
it's bad taxidermy 2.0, folks.
Yeah.
It's not good. At least we can laugh at bad taxidermy.
Yeah, we can laugh at it, but this was too much. There was stuff that they just had to blur out, and I think they even realized after a while it's like no one should see this.
No,
like or at least our sponsors are going to be thinking, yeah. Well, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say like no one should see this, but we are going to put it up on the website, so it's not on cable television.
It's true. Stephen Patterknight, who is the owner of this company, he actually did put the full episode on his website. And I guess for us, Joe, once again, we're in Wisconsin. We're used to seeing animals processed for their delicious meats and their hides, but maybe the country just wasn't ready for that one yet.
I don't think the country or the world was ready for that one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And not like in a cool like guess you guys weren't ready for that, but your kids are going to love it, Marty McFly sort of way. Like, no,
yes.
The world is just never going to be ready for roadkill art.
Yeah, your kids might be more shocked by seeing this than you were, so we're going to cut that one out. On that same topic, though, there was a business that revolved strictly around skull cleaning, and I don't think there's a way to make that PG for anybody.
I mean, they made it really quick in Predator, and that's still rated R. So I don't know how they got away with this on TV. I'm assuming Mike Rowe wasn't hunting men and for sport, like Shia LaBeouf Tuesday Night style. But like they cleaned it up as much as they can or could. Yeah. Oh man.
I mean, I've been around people who have processed deer skulls before with the right rack, and it's something they want to commemorate. There is no part of that process that's fun, smells good, or looks good. Like it's so for them to not show that one. Yeah, I think that was once again another smart decision in the history of this show. But Joe, speaking of good decisions on this show, we talked about some episodes.
Yeah.
Which ones really stuck with you?
A lot of the animal ones are always stickouts for me. So like the I know there was one he did with penguins where it was I think just the work of dealing with penguins just isn't very clean. But one that stuck out with me because for a hot second there, I thought this is a job I could do and just be fine with it, was basically like a salmon counter. And when you hear that, if you haven't seen this, you may think, oh, these are people who just, go out in the wild, sit in a boat, and just count the salmon as they swim by. But actually, what they do is count them after they've died. And to make sure that they don't double count, they hook the salmon, bring it up, and then slice it in two, and then throw it back into the river. And as crazy as it sounds, that's the best thing for the ecosystem because the dead parent salmon are actually eaten by their brood. So they provide food for the younger salmon and the ecosystem flourishes. But I'm you know what? Looking at that job, the salmon isn't terribly heavy. Doing it the whole day would get tiresome, sure. But they slice in half pretty easily with a machete. I think you could do that. But then you remember just how bad dead fish smell. It's you know what? When you smell one dead fish, you don't even have to be inside for it to smell really bad. You can be within a mile of it and you know it's there. So it's you know what? Never mind. Not doing that job either. I'm out. How about you?
No.
What are your standouts?
So for me, the very specific episode was the ostrich farm. And at that point in time, people weren't really obsessing over ostrich as a consumable. It was still very foreign to most people and wasn't even on the menu. But as the years went on, people are all in these outdoorsy things. They always bring their ostrich egg out there with them. This was before all that shit.
Even I think this is around the same time as like the people who'd go new boot goofing with ostrich boots when they were the Reno law enforcement.
Dude, it was a fun episode because you know, Mike is usually out of his element, but one of the things that he can't do is control what animals are usually doing on this show. And so the ostrich, of course, like every time the owner of the farm, he's like pointing at like a specific one, and it's like, that's the one you don't want to mess with. And then like, they zoom in on that ostrich, and you're like, dude, that ostrich.
Mad.
Yeah, yeah, dude.
Like, shit.
Dude, it doesn't matter what side you approach that ostrich from. It's an issue.
It's all danger. It's all bad.
Yeah, yeah, dude. But in that same episode, though, then they show him how to like wrangle the ostrich, and so like you literally have to like put this glove on your hand and then like quickly grab them and then take the glove and put it over their heads. And it's like magic. The ostrich just stop moving, and then they comply. They comply with everything once you do that.
I can't say anything. You just guide me to safety, sir, madam.
And it was hilarious because you're seeing how aggressive these animals can be, and then he does this. The farmer shows him, and it's like, yep, okay, that's now I don't know how to do it, but it's like now I at least understand the function of how to control an ostrich, which I did not know previously the last 20 minutes.
And you probably will never need to use that knowledge, but in case you do, and there is an ostrich running loose in your neighborhood, you're just like, honey, give me the glove.
Yes.
I can do this.
Yes. Stand back. I will attempt science. Yeah. But that's the kind of stuff that I was paying attention to, while watching these episodes. And I always found that interesting. And you did mention the cockroaches of the San Francisco sewer system and underground.
Not a fan of that.
That episode is a standout for me because, for one, me in spaces, Joe, I can't do the whole confined and tight, having to bend over to fit in type of stuff.
This is a Donatello Casey Jones moment that I can think of, where I'd say that
you're a claustrophobic.
You'd tell me
I've never even looked at another guy before.
which honestly, seeing him do that was kind of gut-wrenching enough. But then you have to understand and recognize that there's a camera crew that also has to follow him down there.
God.
So it doesn't matter who you are in that exchange. You kind of got screwed. But here's the part that sorry, I'm still wiggling just thinking about it. As they climb through these areas, the walls look like they're moving. The walls, the 53rd precinct were bleeding.
I knew that was coming.
Yes, that kind of thing. And then he mentions to you as the narrator that, like, yeah, these walls are covered with cockroaches. And they're falling into our shirts, getting into our shoes.
Like,
and we can't do anything about it.
Like, full body zip up apparatuses. The only thing they don't do is cover their heads, and like they're zipped up all the way, and like cockroaches are still finding their way in. And that would also be like a nope, could not do that job. Like, the smell is one thing, the knowing that I'm moving through human feces is another, and the kicker is definitely the cockroaches getting into my suit. Yeah, so that episode ends with Mike Rowe in his underwear at street level, because he is just done with the cockroaches moving through the entirety of his clothing, which I'm sure left a pretty lasting mark on Mike Rowe's mind. But for the rest of us, Mark, what would you say are kind of like the lasting impacts or the lasting legacy of the show?
I think for me, one of the lasting impacts here is just what goes into an operation for some of these basic things that we need to do to function, like what has to happen with that. And one of them is just the concept of a pig farm. Most of us understand it's like, yeah, you're going to have pigs, you breed the pigs, you create more pigs, feed them, give them medication, all that good stuff. But one of the things that you don't think about is that they actually take recycled foods and garbage and they feed it back to the pigs. And so, like, you have a dirty job that is now filthier than it ever should have been. So for me, like it was this. It's funny we're using the dissecting word. Hey, that's part of the show name.
Mm-hmm.
But he would dissect the process of everything that went with this farm or whatever, and you would get to see how it functions from sunup to sundown. Like that's just it's like it feels like a privilege in a way to get to watch that.
Yeah, I believe it. And this is normally the part of the show where we would segue naturally into thanking everyone for watching, but we're watching or listening. But before we do that, Mike, because we talked about Mike this whole time. Mark, something off the cuff here. What's one of the dirtiest jobs you think you've ever had? If you've had one at all.
Well, I did help my grandpa different times here to help break down like old barns and outbuildings. Mm-hmm. One of them was over a pit, like a cow pit, right? So it's a covered building, but the cows were all in there, and then there was a central location that they would push all of the droppings into this pit area. As you can imagine, the stink of that, while it might lower intensity a little bit after the cows are gone, on a hot day when you're 20 feet over that and the heat is rising, that smell is very real. It's very, very present. Quite pungent.
Yeah, Pepperidge Farm remembers, but so does everyone else. That stench does not go away.
Yes. Yes. So I got dirty moving all that stuff around naturally because you know how much I sweat, but then
you do.
That stink.
Oof. Yeah, that's bad.
I will not forget that. What about you, sir?
No. There was like a summer where I detasseled corn in Iowa, which is not a dirty job itself. But one thing the nature of me being in Iowa is that I stayed with a friend's relative, and the friend's relative, as part of a hey, you're staying with me for the week. You're gonna help me with stuff like around this farm that I live at and at an adjacent farm. And one of the things that we got to do was clear out a granary that was filled with rotten grain, which doesn't sound like, oh, maybe it's rotten grain. That's just like, what, moldy bread? Well, I mean, it smells really bad. And it was like water had gotten in there, so it had soaked water up. It had gotten rotten, so it smelled really bad and weighed like twice as much as that. And so it was like a whole weekend we spent just 2 days straight of shoveling and wheelbarrowing out rotten grain from this building. And I would prefer not to do that again in my lifetime. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like that's not going to happen again on the career path that you've chosen. But actually, there is one last thing I wanted to mention about Mike Rowe, and that is this concept of trade activism, because his show naturally brought a lot of attention, like as you mentioned, to jobs that some people may turn their nose up to, or maybe never even knew about, so they didn't even know to try to get education in it, right? Well, as he's wildly successful with his show and other endeavors, Mike Rowe actually creates a foundation called the Mike Rowe Works. And this focuses exactly on the things that we've talked about, more like blue-collar trade work, and offering a resource center to individuals in this type of space so that they can figure out more about, okay, well, what do I need to do to get this job? What kind of education do I need for it? Are there people I can connect with? Like I said, building communities. And it's something that we're finally starting to see kind of circle back to us. Because many people for the last, 25, 30 years, going to college, get a meaningless degree, and then you're still, working retail after you spent 6 years in college. And what I really like about the Mike Rowe Works Foundation is that they're teaching people things that they're going to use and then helping them find the jobs that they can apply that towards. There's a part of me that wishes I could have focused on trades, because if I took interest in something, Joe, I think you've seen this with me, once I'm interested in it, I commit.
That you do.
And
And 105 platinum trophies later in the PlayStation Network.
oh, we've blown past that number. We're actually closing in on 200, but no big deal. We're not gonna brag or anything on that one. But what we are going to do is thank you for listening to Digital Dissection. As always, we appreciate everything the Dissection crew does for us week after week, whether it's a like, share, subscribe, it all helps. Your support goes a very long way. And if you happen upon this show by accident, which some people still do, believe it or not, why not drop us a review or comment on the show?
And we love hearing from you. So feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com, where we welcome your ideas for future shows and, well, really anything else you'd like to discuss. Except ideas for future dirty jobs for us to do. We will not do them.
That'd be funny, though. We could comment on what we receive and do a top 10 list. I think it'd be fun.
Maybe we could do that, but I mean, if you want that sort of anguish, you could literally just watch me go backpacking to my current job again and just see me just die. And on that note, until next time, keep on dissecting.